Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sports Skope. I'm your host, Robert Butler, on this sixth day of December 2022. No shortage of breaking news in the wild world of sports, particularly the NFL. Baker Mayfield looks like he's going to be picked up by the LA Rams. I don't know what the school of thought there is. Maybe Sean McVay's looking for a potential bargain play there. He's going to go to the Rams. They're the only team to put a waiver in on their former number one overall pick. Also, Adam Schefter reports that Jimmy Garoppolo will not need surgery on his foot. He could potentially be back by as early as the divisional playoff round. So that would open up things potentially for them to still have a shot against what I see as probably a NFC championship opponent, probably a Philadelphia Eagles. I'll give you my Power Five. Speaking of the Eagles, all right, I'll give you that. Good scope, bad scope. The new segment I'll bring in on Tuesday. The college football playoff, I'll discuss those four teams. Deion Sanders, Colorado head coach. I'll discuss that, who he's bringing with him, and more. But first, biggest sporting news story, folks, of the day is John Robertson. I mean, I'm out of Nashville. The general manager for the Tennessee Titans, John Robertson, surprisingly fired today. The national sports media seemed a little shocked. I was reading some of the stuff they put on Twitter. He just signed, the general manager for the Tennessee Titans just signed an extension in February. The Titans got a 3-game lead in the AFC South. Now, that being said, it is the worst division in football. I think ownership, upper management saw the offensive line flaws with how well A.J. Brown is playing against Tennessee. But starting, paying a guy like Ryan Tannehill $38 million didn't help. And trading away, he was traded away for nothing to the Dolphins for Tua, back when the Dolphins were tanking for Tua just a few years ago, you know. And then Amy Adams Strunk, I recently thought maybe that once she got Vrabel and Robertson together with the early success, I thought that, man, she would just be like, okay, well, I'm going to lay back. I'm not going to pay any attention to this organization. I'm not going to be detail-oriented like I was. They're winning now. We got the new stadium. This guy's a local guy. He's from Tennessee. Really good coach. But that's not how it's going down. She's paying attention. She's got a lot of her father in her. She says today, since becoming controlling owner since 2015, that's the year he was hired, my goal has been to raise the standard for what is expected in all facets of our organization. I believe this is Amy Adams Strunk, the owner, Bud Adams' daughter, controller. I believe we made significant progress both on and off the field through investments in leadership, personnel, new ideas. This progress includes the care of our business, the football team itself, and regularly evaluated both by results, wins, and losses. Construction of roster and building. So, caught me by surprise. I've been talking about John Robertson with a friend from work the last few weeks, and he made some really good points. He says this guy takes a lot. This is going back 3 weeks. He says he takes a lot of chances on first-round picks that are injury-prone players. Going back just a few years ago, Caleb Farley, second-year player, had severe back problems. Very concerning for teams in the NFL. Had a high grade, but he had a back injury. And, of course, he gets injured again last year. He's injured again this year. Before he got injured, he was third on the depth chart. That was a big gamble. Jeffrey Simmons tore his ACL while training for the combine. That gamble played off. Both for first-round gambles. But if you look at some of the risks that he's taking. You know, he made such a good hire. He got off to such a good start with getting guys like Derrick Henry in the second round, you know, making the big trade on the first round pick, getting Jack Conklin there, finding Kevin Byard in the third round. But he's also guys like offensive tackle Isaiah Wilson from 2020. He should have done more background check. This guy played 7 snaps with the Titans. And the Titans traded him away from a 7th round pick to the Dolphins. The Dolphins cut him not too shortly after that. Nobody, this is what PaulKaharski.com, covering his team for over 20 years. Nobody from the 20, not one player from a 9-man 2017 draft class, included 2 first-rounders, 2 third-rounders, and a second contract with the Titans, is no longer on the roster, though center Corey Levin returned is on the roster. One person out of all those players, none of those returned. Other things that I've noticed. Now, the fact that you're winning, this stuff gets put under, it kind of gets swept under the rug, you know? But if you look at, you know, letting players like Jack Conklin go, right tackle to Cleveland, Roger Saffold go, left guard, blocking guard to the Bills, and drafting guys like Corey Davis, a wide receiver with the 5th overall pick. And I noted to myself, I look back at that particular draft, guys. Marshawn Lattimore, excellent Pro Bowl level corner, drafted in that draft for the New Orleans Saints behind Corey Davis. Hassan Reddick, Pro Bowl level linebacker. Marlon Humphrey, excellent cornerback for the Baltimore Ravens. And this one really made me sick if you're a Tennessee Titans fan. TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year. TJ Watt was drafted after Corey Davis. Not to mention the very next pick was Jamal Adams. Now, typically, this is a general rule from as far as the draft is concerned. If you're picking in the top 20, which means you didn't make the draft. I mean, okay, you've got 4 teams in the NFC that make the playoffs, division winners, 4 in the AFC. That's 8, right? Then you've got 3 wild cards and 3 wild card. 8 and 6 is 14, okay? You subtract 14 from 32. Other than those 14 that made the playoffs, if you're drafted essentially in the top 20, in the top 18, you do not want to draft in that top 20, top 18, a running back, a wide receiver, or a safety. Now, obviously, if you've already got your quarterback, you throw quarterback in there. Punter and kicker means without saying. You don't want to draft those 3 positions right there. You want offensive line, defensive line, cornerback. Offensive line, defensive back, cornerback. A linebacker if he grades really high, because a linebacker is the least bust rate in first round. A massive study's been done. It's the least. And you know what that is? 26%. You do not draft running back, wide receiver, safety in that top 20 rule of thumb. And he's drafting guys like Corey Davis, you know. So those type of rules, he did that. He's taking these wild swings. And that's what I said. I said, she's letting these guys do anything. I said this last summer, for those of you that watch this program all the time, you know, I said, man, and so that's what I think he did. He had such early success the first year or two that he started taking these wild risks. And going back to the A.J. Brown trade, I thought that him and Vrabel were on the same page, and they wouldn't. And they were not, because Vrabel was upset, visibly upset when that trade was made. And another thing, you're getting multiple first-round and second-round picks for older players, Tyreek Hill, and Devontae Adams. And you got a guy younger, 24 years old. You got an A.J. Brown, 24, and they give you a 23rd pick for that? 1 first-round pick? They could have at least got a 3rd-round pick if you just watch the film on A.J. Brown. So he messed that up. You know, you look at the Isaiah Wilson debacle. You look at the Caleb Farley. You look at the 5 players in 2017 that are no longer on the roster. Yes, he brought in Derrick Henry, Kevin Byard, Mike Vrabel, but it's just one big thing after another. And only reason this wasn't made sooner, again, because they're winning, you know. And then you say, what? So what do you do now? So now what? Okay. Pickle says scouting cost him his job. Yeah. So what do you do now? Potential replacements. Get a person from a successful staff over the years. Start with a team like the team that beat the Titans, the Eagles. You know, the Eagles currently have the Saints' first-round pick. Howie Roseman, this Eagles team, by the way, I'll go into a little bit more on him. I was going to do this anyways, by the way. It's like I was thinking along the same tracks as the owner. I'm going to talk about Howie Roseman in depth between him and Jeffrey Lurie, what they've accomplished since becoming owner, general manager of the Eagles. And it's not been that long. I'm going to say Lurie's only been there 20 years as an owner. Look what they've accomplished. A lot of playoff wins, a lot of playoff appearances. But they've probably got the best offensive line in the NFL. They got a top 5 defensive line in the NFL. The Eagles won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles at quarterback. That's how good a roster they've had. Baltimore. Find somebody from Baltimore staff. The New York Post says the best draft value over the last 5 years. And I said this without looking it up, but now I've officially looked up. You can look it up. Best draft. If you Google best draft value over the next 5 years, the first team that pops up there is the Baltimore Ravens. You know, again, go back 22 years with them since Ozzie Newsome took over and his philosophy. They've got 2 Super Bowl wins. They're in the playoffs, or supposedly going to be in the playoffs every year. They're in every single game, it seems like, that Raven team. They've not had they've had guys like Trent Dilfer. They've had guys that can't even throw the ball straight, like Lamar Jackson. They've had one-hit wonders like Joe Flacco win Super Bowls. One-year wonder guys. Because an excellent defense. Those are 2 philosophies that say offensive line, defensive line, don't overpay for wide receivers. Let's be good, like Jamie Pagg said. He's a smart guy. He dresses up, puts a lot of paint, looks like a crazy person, but he's pretty educated when it comes to football because I cross-reference a lot of this stuff, okay? But, you know, offensive line, defensive line, cornerbacks. We already know quarterback. That's a given. You can't find one every year, but you can find, if you do your homework, you can find good offensive line players, good defensive line players, and cornerback players. Those are positions rather than quarterback you re-sign. You want to keep that continuity in those particular positions. Safety can be replaced. Linebacker you can find in the draft. Okay. Running back, quarterback, or running back, wide receiver, maybe re-sign one wide receiver, and it may not even be the top wide receiver. It may simply be the best blocker in the number 2. Running backs, you can replace them. I would have moved off Derrick Henry. And put that into an offensive lineman. You know, did I mention the fact that he also traded for Julio Jones, a player, and paid him $15 million for a guy who had hamstring injuries the last 2 years? Okay. So others. Okay. Now, any particular name you may ask? Okay. Well, yes, I do have a name. How about Reggie McKenzie? He is a senior personnel executive for the Miami Dolphins. He's worked with the Raiders. He was moved off Gruden want to bring his guy in, Mike Mayock, which was a total disaster. None of those players worked out practically. But he brought in guys like Derek Carr from the second round, Khalil Mack he drafted. Okay. Then he goes back. He had a big hand in with the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, players like that. This guy has an eye for talent. He's kind of like an Ozzie Newsome type of guy. He would be the guy that I would look at. But Baltimore, Pittsburgh, teams that are consistent every year, they draft well. Kansas City, not just Patrick Mahomes. Kansas City rebuilt their whole offensive line in 1 year. Their whole offensive line in 1 year. That's a good general manager. It's not just Patrick Mahomes. The offensive line, the defensive line. They got a good defensive coordinator. Go from organizations who are not one-hit wonders, who are year in and year out consistently good every year. And usually they have the same motto. They don't overpay for players. They do not overpay for players, and they let flashy players go. Tyreek Hill moved on. Hollywood Brown wanted out of Baltimore. Said, yeah, sure, we'll trade you. We'll trade you. Go ahead. Orlando Brown, he wanted out of Baltimore. I said, we got Ronnie Stanley. They have really good scouts there. Their backup left tackle was so good in Baltimore that they traded him, got a first-round pick from Kansas City. Kansas City's so happy. Baltimore's still doing good, even though Ronnie Stanley still hasn't recovered from his injury. And at last but not least, you can laugh all you want, but personnel's not a problem in Dallas. Personnel's not a problem in Dallas. It's Jerry Jones's problem. But you look at those organizations, I would prefer Reggie McKenzie or someone from Philadelphia or Baltimore, Pittsburgh. There's assistants somewhere. And those Kansas City, those teams right there, find an assistant there and hire them. And get as many scouts from those teams as you possibly can, particularly Baltimore. They rarely miss. And Reggie McKenzie, he played at Tennessee as a player. He's from Knoxville, but that's all secondary stuff. The guy's really good. And he's not just because he's a Bill Belichick guy. He's got an eye for talent. Those are just a few players that McKenzie – and have you noticed that Miami's drafting a lot better? Since 2019, yeah, McKenzie's helping. He's doing that. He's got the Midas touch, Pickles. But so it was a lot going on there. Again, the local reporters knew exactly what the situation was. The national people thought that Amy Adams was overreacting. The local people usually know more about it. I was surprised the local people said anything. Yeah, Pickles says somebody like Jim Jeffcoat would be. Ravens stay heavy on defense in the draft. Yeah, and they draft from big programs. They stay heavy on offensive line. They got the best center in football. They did draft a safety. Now, if you're a team that's already made the playoffs and you're a loaded roster, yeah, you could break some of the rules. You could break some of the rules and draft a running back, or safety. Like Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame that the Ravens got. Yeah, only 5 games left, what Carlos says. Yeah, so I think that they have 5 games left. They got a 3-game lead, and 3 of those games are 2 against Jacksonville, 1's against Houston. They've got the number. They are already eliminated from playoff contention. Houston is. Jacksonville lost again last week. They're still developing. Tennessee matches up extremely well with them. And the other 2 games, they've got Dallas at home, who's susceptible against the run. And then they got to play at the Charger, who's also susceptible against the run. 2 teams. So I think Tennessee will win this division. But she looked at that offensive line and she said, man, this guy, we've let him get away with too much here. But mainly, again, you cannot pay a guy like Ryan Tannehill $38 million. Those organizations I just mentioned, they would never pay a guy like Tannehill. Tannehill was traded to Tennessee. He was a $7 million cap hit. In 2019, Tennessee made it to the AFC Championship game, and then they extended him. He's worth, at minimum, at maximum, half of that, preferably around $10 million. You know, tell him, say, hey, go get 25 from Washington. That you want to live in that dumpster fire? You want to go play under Jim Irsay and his craziness? Do you want to go play for one of those teams? Or do you want to stay here in Tennessee where you've got a solid foundation and we'll pay you 12, 15, 20 with incentives, which usually don't hit the cap. Incentives don't hit the cap. Snap incentives, playoff win incentives, playoff advance incentives. We'll make you the highest paid player on the team by like $1, okay? You're Ryan Tannehill. You're a converted wide receiver to a quarterback. Do you want a good life here and make a little bit more money? Or do you want to make a ton of more money and be miserable for the next 3 years and have to fight them over that? That's how I would deal with a guy like Tannehill. Just tell him the facts. Say, go out and do what you got to do elsewhere, man. We'll do what we got to do. We're not going to overpay you, though. You know? And that's the biggest thing. Because you take Tannehill's salary down $20 million to 18, right? He's making 38 this year. You still have a guy like Jack Conklin on your team. You have an A.J. Brown still on your team. You have a Roger Saffold on your team. Those are the facts. Those are the facts, folks. Okay? Now, all righty then. What else should I go to here in the NFL? So let's go with good scope, bad scope. Good scope. Tennessee loses 2 weeks. Really show how bad the offensive line is and the secondary is. Ownership noticed it and fired the general manager. I said that yesterday. I said it yesterday. Bad scope. Jalen Hurts struggled to make a second read. I said this out of college. And will be exposed this year. The Eagles' backup quarterback, because when the team goes out and gets A.J. Brown, I was totally wrong. They get the best record in NFL. Titans stopped the run on him Sunday. That's one thing they did do well. But he has 130-plus passer rating, 3 touchdowns. He's in the top 7 in QBR this season. I was wrong there. That was a bad scope. Good scope. Preseason prediction, Cincinnati will not be a fraud. With the upgrade of their offensive line, they will be competitive in this season. 3 big wins, 2 on the road. Team getting healthy at the right time. Jamar Chase is back. I had them in the preseason losing to Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game. That could very well be the case for the Cincinnati Bengals. Bad scope. Writing off Tampa too early because they had offensive line injuries. Tom Brady without Tristan Wirfs to one of the better defensive lines who's gave him trouble since he's been in Tampa, comes back without Tristan Wirfs and beats the Saints in the last 2 minutes. Beats the Saints last 5 minutes, down 2 touchdowns practically. And goes on and gets a win. Now they're back to 500. They're going to get Tristan Wirfs back in a few weeks, get some more help at the offensive line and defense in the next few weeks. They could be a scary team in the NFC that nobody is going to take serious, including myself. Pickle says, and Carlos said you didn't even mention Bud Dupree contract. Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about some of the bad moves this guy's made. It tells you how good a coach Mike Vrabel is. Now, I hope that Amy Adams don't make the move and give Vrabel all the power. That can be a disaster too. that could ask some of the other Super Bowl winning coaches who've tried that, including the former Packers coach that went on to be the coach and general manager of the Seattle Seahawks. I don't think that's going to be the case. I believe she understands this. I really do. So anyways, all right. Back to good scope, bad scope. I looked up and I lost track of where I was. Okay. But like I said, bad, and I ended it with the bad. Yeah, writing off Tampa too soon. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the Power 5. All right, let's start with number 5. All right, number 5, Dallas. 9-3, may have the best pass rush in football. 2 of the last 3 wins have been by blowouts, sticking with the run. Offensive line getting healthy. Tyler Smith, another great rookie. This rookie is killing it at left tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. Tony Pollard really coming into his own. Probably the best 1-2 punch with Pollard and Zeke Elliott. We've got your power and you've got your speed combo there. 9-3, by the way. That's the second best record in the NFC, behind only 11-1. The Philadelphia Eagles. They're looking pretty good. I had to put them 5th, man. They've really made good second half adjustments late. Other than the tobacco in Green Bay, they should be 10-2. But they're Dallas. Do I still trust their coaching? No. But they're playing really well. I had to put them in the top 5. Number 4, a little controversial here, but I don't care. It's my Power 5. Cincinnati. They've won 6 of 7. Burrow's having a running game that's really helping him. That offensive line, shape it into its own, like I just said it would be. Jamar Chase is back. Second half defensive adjustments in the first 7 games. No touchdowns allowed in the second half. They shut out the high-flying Kansas City Chiefs in the fourth quarter. They shut out the Kansas City Chiefs in the fourth quarter. That's a good football team. That's a good football team. Number 4, Cincinnati. Okay, Kansas City. Now, they're still top 7 in run defense. Now, mind you, Mecole Hardman's been out for a few weeks. That's supposed to be their Tyreek Hill replacement, folks. Mecole Hardman's supposed to be their Tyreek Hill replacement. Kadarius Toney, the guy they just recently picked up, he's been out the last few weeks. Okay? They're a bad call away from winning that game and still having the best record in the AFC, which leads me to number 2. Who has the best record in the AFC? Who would have the bye week in the AFC if the playoffs started today? That would be Buffalo. Buffalo's got a 3-game winning streak. They got that was just a fluke play that cost them that game in Minnesota. They've also had some injuries on the defensive backside up front too as well. They're going to get Von Miller back in a few weeks. Rossanu, I think, is already back. Poyer, there's safeties back. Tre'Davious White's been back. He's been playing his way. By the way, Tre'Davious White also in that 2017 draft that Tennessee simply took a guy like Corey Davis. Man, that makes me sick. Anyways, Buffalo. Getting healthier on both sides of the ball. 90-plus yards rushing by their running backs last week, folks. They're starting to get better at the right place. By the way, they've won 3 games in like 18 days. You know, they were snowed out of their hometown 1 week. They fly on a Saturday in a crazy blizzard from Buffalo to Detroit, stay in Detroit 4 more days later, being out of their home, play another game, win that game against the home team, fly back and beat an excellent, in just 1 week span, beat an excellently coached defensive new Patriot team 24-10. Okay. And that game never really seemed close to me. And of course, number 1, they've earned it. The Philadelphia Eagles, 11-1. Jalen Hurts playing like a league MVP. Best offensive line in football. Top 5 defensive line. 3rd in total defense. a third in total offense, second in total defense. I mean, they're playing out of this world. What can I say? They really don't have a weakness right now. They're young. They're not too young in some places. They got the nice balance of offense and defense. They've got a dual threat quarterback that can actually throw and pass. Again, Titans, they stopped the run. They stopped the run Sunday. They didn't hold them to nothing hardly. But Hurts had 138 passer rating and 3 touchdowns, and he ran for 1. He smoked them. So, again, Philadelphia is number 1, Buffalo number 2, although I may take Buffalo if they're both healthy in the Super Bowl. And Kansas City number 3, they can be better. Cincinnati number 4, Dallas number 5. This could all change in a few weeks, but that's my top 5 as of today. Pickle says Philly runs the ball and stops the run. Yes. Carlos says just 2-year contract with options. I'm not sure. Possibly for Tannehill. Yes. Tennessee can contract him and move people internally. Yes. Coden, vice president and general. I don't know who that is, but I'll say this, Carlos. There's some good people out there. I'm curious of what Ryan Poles. Now he's really young. He was an assistant under Brett Leach of the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm curious at what he's going to do. I'm curious at what he's going to do with the Chicago Bears. They got over $113 million and a very high draft class, draft picks there in Chicagoland. So I'm curious about that. I will get to college football playoff, Deion Sanders story. I'll be back here in about 1 minute and 19 seconds, folks, before I forget to at least get one commercial break in. Hello, Sports Skope followers. After 5 years of doing this program once a week, balancing a 60-hour work week job, I've decided to do the program 5 days a week, 1 hour a night, taking a significant pay cut. So I've started a Patreon page, which is Patreon, Patreon/SportsSkope, spelled the same way at the bottom of the screen you see there. For $5 a month, 17 cents a day, you can help support the program. You ask yourself, why SportsSkope? Well, I bring in such big names such as Al Borges, former Auburn offensive coordinator, and I cover the big news in sports that the corporate media will not cover. If you want to contribute more than $5 a month, you can go use the Cash App. The cash tag is SportsSkope, again, spelled the same way. Or you can go to the Zelle app, sportsskope@gmail.com. SportsSkope has about 5,000 followers and growing. If you want to advertise on the program, you can email me. The word is SportsSkope, spelled the same way again, @gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the program. Okay, I'm live here now. Okay, now the college football playoff is out. The matchups are set. Now, mind you, folks, in 2 years, the 2024. So we got next season coming up in 23, September of next year. We'll have that season. Then the next season, September of 24, will be at a 12-team playoff. And you would see teams like Tennessee and Alabama would be in that particular playoff. Okay, so college football playoff, TCU gets a 3 seed. After losing to Kansas State in the championship game, TCU's biggest wins were over Texas and Oklahoma State. Okay, they have problems running the football. They played really good defense against Texas. But do you really honestly think that TCU losing a neutral site game to Kansas State, no offense to Kansas State, is better than an Alabama team that lost 2 last-second plays one in overtime, a team, or I think it was overtime, a team goes for 2 to beat Alabama, and another one, a last-second 50-yard field goal, both of them on the road, okay? Keep that in mind. Now, Ohio State's biggest wins, Ohio State's a 4 seed. Their biggest wins over Notre Dame, who lost to Marshall. Notre Dame was overrated, okay? They lost to Marshall. I shouldn't have to say anything else there. Who else did they beat? An overrated Penn State team. So they beat Notre Dame, who later lost to Marshall. An overrated Penn State team. No, Indiana. I mean, who else did Michigan beat or did Ohio State beat? They were beat by 3 touchdowns in their own stadium by Michigan. Okay? Now, Alabama wins. They beat Texas when they were ranked pretty high. They beat 11th ranked Ole Miss. They beat 20th ranked Arkansas and 24th ranked Mississippi State. They lost on the road. Last second place to Tennessee and LSU, both ranked at the time of the loss. So Georgia will play Michigan 2 times, in my opinion. And Georgia is only 6.5-point favorites against Ohio State. So Ohio State was going to play Georgia. They should be 6.5-point favorites over Alabama. Ohio State lost at home by 3 touchdowns to Michigan. Now, Georgia, this could be a 47-14 game if Georgia brings their A game and Ohio State brings their A game in a neutral site. Georgia could beat this team 47-14, in my opinion. I really do think that they could. So that is a great spread, And I'm thinking about just putting a few dollars on it because I think it should be 10 at least. Georgia and Ohio State. And Colin Coward's like, yeah, Ohio State with all those NFL players, they've been told how bad they're. I said, no, this is a very generous point spread. It could be 10 easy, 11, And if Georgia wanted to turn it on, which I think they will, they will beat Ohio State like a drum. And TCU versus Michigan, that'll be interesting. They're a 7-point favorite, but I think Michigan will beat TCU. But this is a particular year where you like to have seen Tennessee and Alabama get in. And Alabama will. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, so essentially, Ohio State had to get up 3 times. I'm gonna be nice. Ohio State had to get up 3 times this year for an opponent. I mean, they have Northwestern on Nebraska, just Rutgers, Maryland, teams that are just so. Alabama had to get up every single team they played in the Western Conference. Arkansas, Mississippi State was ranked. Ole Miss was ranked. LSU was ranked. Even Auburn. Just throw Auburn out. Arkansas, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. That's 4 ranked teams right there. That's just the West. They had to get up for Tennessee. That's 5. In a normal year, it's 6 to 7 big games. 6 to 7. Excuse me, 6 because they played at Texas. At Texas, not a neutral site game. They play at Texas. But throw out the non-conference for a second. And I mentioned Texas A&M's got very down Texas A&M year, but they got a big for Alabama. That was a 4-point. But why? Because it's Alabama. I forgot about Texas A&M. So they have to get up at minimum twice as many times as Ohio State does for their competition. Minimum. And that's not even mentioning having to play a Tennessee this past year or a Georgia in the championship game. So you throw, that's before the championship game, 6 to 7 big games a year versus 3 or 2 for Ohio State. So I really hope that Georgia just mops their, and that's, and quite frankly, that's what, I convinced myself last year that Michigan would beat Georgia. 2 drives in, I said, this is over. I remember one year, people were really hyping up Texas, and no, it was Notre Dame. They were hyping up Notre Dame and talking about this guy from Notre Dame. I think it was that linebacker that got fooled by the woman. He got catfished. And I remember Brett Musburger, I want to say, he says, if first quarter, it was like 21-0. He said, if this were a fight, they would call it already. Because Alabama was running through Notre Dame like a hot knife through butter. Texas, they hung in there for a little while with Alabama until Alabama knocked their quarterback out. That was like Colt McCoy. And that was another one of those, if this were a fight, they would call it already. Now, Clemson, that's a different story. Clemson will play Tennessee in the bowl game, by the way. Pickle says he thinks it'll be 38-14. Carlos, Monte Teo. I bought in. I mean, I buy into this media hype, Carlos. And Brett Musburger was saying, man, if this were a fight, they would call it already. They would call this thing, man. So I'm looking forward to this 12-team playoff, and it will be 24, folks, before you know it. Really. It really will be. Okay. Deion Sanders takes the Colorado job. This is going to be a lot more interesting a venture than anybody thinks it will be. He's going to take the Colorado job. Now, his son, Shedeur Sanders, he's the quarterback at Jackson State. His son, Deion Sanders' son, is the quarterback at Jackson State. And by the way, his son was a 4-star player out of high school, according to 24/7 rankings. He'll be a junior this year. The team in Jackson State's undefeated. If I watched some of his highlights, folks, and he looked like this was on a smaller scale. Some of his movement, some of his passes, his runs, when he decided to run, when he decided not to run, when he was doing a read, it looked a lot like Hendon Hooker at Tennessee, who did not even get called to the Heisman race. And his numbers are good as anybody, and he didn't even play a whole season because he tore his ACL in the South Carolina game. So anyways, so Deion gives this speech about, he just tells these kids straight up, hey, look, man, you're 1-11, okay? Yes, I'm bringing some players with me. He tells these kids this. This leaks out all over the internet. And we know he's carrying his son. But also, he's going to get Justin Hunter. This cornerback who is the number 1 overall recruit in the country last year. He'll be a sophomore next year. Cornerback that went to Jackson State. He was originally committed to Florida State, Deion's alumni. Deion brought him over from Florida State commitment, takes him to Jackson State in Mississippi. Now, this kid's going to transfer by all means, according to 24/7. Now, Deion hasn't mentioned this. Deion actually tells these kids at this meeting. He says, first of all, Everybody else is still playing football, and you're not. But he tells these kids, hey, if you want to get in the transfer portal, get in there because I'm carrying some people with me. And there's a few positions we already got lined up. He's very straightforward, very straightforward. He's not a beat around the bush kind. I like that. Like Kirk Cousins said. And a side note on Shedeur Sanders is John Lynch from the 49ers. He was at a Jackson State game scouting his son the other day. So, he's going to get his son to transfer. He's going to get that top cornerback, this Justin Hunter, to transfer. Think about Colorado State. You say, well, that's Colorado State. Colorado State may have a really good left guard there. They may have a tackle there. And that's what Deion's going to tell these kids. Maybe somebody from Utah, maybe somebody from Oregon to transfer over there. Think about the Pac-12. Think UCLA, Oregon, USC, those players. He'll get some transfers like nobody's business. He'll get some transfers from Nebraska. They've got a new coach. He'll get transfers. He'll definitely get transfers. And his son, a mobile quarterback, that's going to be exciting. They're going to be playing in the Pac-12. Oregon State players. I mean, he's going to get all kinds of players to come over there. I just don't know how good they're going to be, but I do know one thing. They're going to be interesting. And if it was me, now mind you folks, some of you older folks like myself, Colorado had a Heisman Trophy there. Rashaan Salam in 93. This team was pretty competitive. I want to say Chris Brown, former Tennessee Titan, scored 6 touchdowns for Colorado in the late 90s against Nebraska. And he went on to be a pretty solid NFL player. So they've had players in the past. They've kind of fell. Is he going to have problems because pot is legal in California? There's no restrictions. Yeah, he'll have problems like that. But all that flash aside, I've had Jim Jeffcoat on. He played with Deion. This guy's a very serious taskmaster. He tells kids don't be wearing flip-flops and stuff to class. Sit straight up. Sit up in class. He really monitors their study habits. He's a very strict disciplinarian. He just likes to look good doing it. He's a no-nonsense kind of guy. I think they'll probably win some games here. And I would at least interviewed him for the Auburn job. Now, of course, I said Hugh Freeze probably the better pick because Freeze has already shown he could beat Alabama. That's a big part of that job. But, you don't know how far a guy like a Deion can take you with the work ethic that he's shown he's already have and his recruiting ability going back to that 60 Minutes interview where he's saying that he was in line to compete with Alabama on an offensive lineman, not just players that were receivers and cornerbacks, players that he can relate to. He was also winning in on offensive linemen. I think if I'm Auburn, I may have rolled the dice with him. And again, he may, if Mike Norvell, if he continues just to be okay at Florida State, maybe they fire him and Deion gets his shot. Maybe Deion gets an SEC shot here in a few years. Maybe Alabama calls him in a few years. Maybe Auburn, it doesn't work out with Hugh Freeze and they call it. I think that there's a lot that can happen with this, And Colorado says now is at Colorado. Was at Jackson State. Yeah, he was a quarterback there, Colorado's. They were undefeated. He's already getting pro scouts looking at him. He's a junior. He'll be a junior this year. So, he might even be a Heisman candidate. Remember, Deion, he works like he plays hard. He works really hard at this stuff. I've seen it. And his record, I mean, he's 27-5 at Jackson State in 3 seasons, undefeated this year. you know. And quite frankly, there's no dominant team in the Pac-12. I mean, you look at Lincoln Riley with USC. Their defense is not that good. Their defense was not that good at Oklahoma, and Oklahoma gets All-Americans in every position if they want to. They don't get the dominant players that Alabama gets. But if Lincoln Riley really set his mind to it, he could have got a better defense, because the coach that he took over for, he had a defensive background. He could have took some more play. He just didn't pay any attention to that. He never paid any attention to that. And a lot of reason why I thought behind Lincoln Riley even taking that USC job from Oklahoma, because Oklahoma is going to eventually go with Texas to the SEC, where it's so physical every week. And, he couldn't get to bring in the defensive players to match that physicality, So he carries Caleb Williams with him to USC. They look great most of the year, won a few shootouts. But when a physical team like Utah got a hold of them, they lost both of those games. They'll score a lot of points, but I don't know about winning a national championship. But I know a guy like Deion, he'll get it on both sides, cornerback and quarterback, and physicality. Florida State, a very physical team. He played on 2 Super Bowl teams, the 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys. Guys like Charles Haley, Ken Norton Jr. I know that's the son of Ken Norton, linebacker there. 2 very fit. So he knows what it takes. I understand that this issues this was over 10 years ago at his high school prime prep academy. I think he's learned from that. Nothing's really came out bad about him at Jackson State. He's in his mid-50s now. His sons are playing. I think he's really matured as a person, and he's dedicated to winning. I'm excited to see how this works out. I ain't saying they're going to win national, but I could see him winning 7-8 games next year, getting a big upset, especially at Colorado. He will light a match for these guys. And Pickle says Lincoln Riley didn't want the competition. No, he didn't want the competition. He can say whatever he wants to. LSU's job was open. If he really wanted the defense, just take the LSU job, and look at the coaching now in the SEC with guys like Mike Leach. He annoys me, but Lane Kiffin, Hugh Freeze, the quality of coaching has gotten better in the SEC. And guys like Colin Cowherd, he's a Pac-12 apologist. He said that's better coaching than the Pac-12. I said, you got one really good offensive coordinator there. The Oregon guy is overrated. The Oregon State guy, he's had a good year. But, Utah, yeah, he's solid. But how well do they play on the road? Not too well. Is their ability? Big 12, Big 10. I think all of it's went to the SEC. I know there's good coaches in other conferences, but as far as Deion in a place like Colorado, I'm sure it's not his first choice. I probably would have took the South Florida job. What is it, UCF? But he wants to be in a major conference, and he showing me that he's willing to shine wherever he needs to shine at. It doesn't have to be at the ideal Southern place. It doesn't have to be in the South. He can make things happen, and I think he will. He's already coming in with his son there, and he's coming in with that. I'm pretty sure that cornerback is going to come, which is the top player in the country, and he's lived up to it. He has definitely lived up. Over 6 foot tall. This guy's a good guy, good ball skills. He's been trained by the best ever, Deion. So I'm curious to see how many flips he gets, how many transfers he gets. I'm curious to see how his defense looks. It's a lot to be said about it. It's one of the more exciting hires in all of college football, other than maybe Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. That's with these big Hugh Freeze at Auburn, Deion Sanders at Colorado. People are overlooking how good Luke Fickell was at Cincinnati. And I'm curious because you know and I know that Wisconsin has got some players over the years that come in and play in the NFL. Offensive linemen, defensive. J.J. Watt went to Wisconsin, folks. Jonathan Taylor went to Wisconsin. All right? A lot of good offensive linemen come through Wisconsin. Russell Wilson transferred to Wisconsin. So he's an NFL guy, you know. So Luke Fickell, Wisconsin, that's my most interesting job to monitor. I know Hugh Freeze is going to be good. I just don't know how good because he's got to compete with Brian Kelly at the LSU, and of course Saban. And I'm curious to see what Jimbo Fisher's going to do at offensive coordinator and what type of quarterback he's going to be able to get to transfer to Texas A&M. Pickles, the SEC's high pressure win now league. Yeah, a lot of money, you know. Great Republic of Voters, different animal than Jack Smith. Yeah, it is. But, you know, he's telling everybody, if you listen to his speech, I'm not here to play around. I'm not here to hear any games. I'm not here to play games. We can actually play the game, but I'm not going to be playing games. He's very serious about winning. He's very respectful. But I tell you what I like about Deion. The few speeches I've heard him say to the teams, he reminds me of Jimmy Johnson. You know, and I'm still going to try to get Jimmy Johnson on the show. He's strict, but he's fair, and he's direct. And I don't see him as being condescending whatsoever. He's very honest. You know, Jimmy Johnson said, you know, I do coach players differently. You know, if I see a guy, which I've got a good soundbite on Troy Aikman, a strong leader, no nonsense guy. He says, you know, if Troy or Emmett, if they're sleeping in the meeting, I'll wake them up. Hey, man, need to get up, pay attention. But, you know, if a special teams guy, he's cut right there. He's cut right there. That's how I see a Deion coaching. I think he coaches with that same manner. He played under Bobby Bowden. He played under, I don't know if he played under Jimmy Johnson or it was Barry Switzer. I can't remember. I think it was Switzer who came in late. Jerry made that move happen. But, you know, he's a, you know, no-nonsense guy. But I thought he would be about the nonsense, but he's not. He's not. I think he's going to turn out to be a good coach. So if you guys like the show, share the show. I'll be back tomorrow. Andre Gibson will be on the program. I'm really looking forward to seeing what his take is on the Tennessee Titans really shocking the NFL world, firing their general manager in the middle of the season like this with the 3-game lead. With the 3-game lead in the division. But, you know, he's a local. I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to point out that all these missed draft picks. You can only miss so much in the draft, you know. And I think I may ask him that. And, you know, I'm curious of what this Baker – I don't know what the Rams are thinking with the Baker Mayfield thing. But they see something. They see something somebody else don't see, you know. And I did notice this, that 1 to 3 weeks is what it's looking like officially. PCL injury for Lamar Jackson. And they still got a chance to win the division. Because, again, they're one of those teams who are built so well that they can withstand a backup quarterback, okay? So Andre will be on, hopefully on Wednesday. And we'll talk about that, a few other things. And then Thursday's show, I'll give you a preview of that. I'll talk a little NBA on Thursday. interesting Andrew Luck story I've read over the last few days, former Indianapolis Colt. And we'll look into the Eagles. I'll look into Howie Roseman there. So, Andre, we will get into it. We will get into it Wednesday, man. I will send you the email tomorrow, my friend. Thank you, Pickles. Have a good night, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow with Andre Gibson. Same place, same time here on Sports Skope.